Okay, this is like the second time that I've done this video, so I'm going to try to be as quick and concise as I can, especially after looking at how I can ramble on the last time I've done a couple of videos that never have been posted yet. So this is going to be my very first video that's actually going to get posted. So now this right here is to be a representation of the line between our hands whenever we're spinning. So whether we're in wheel plane or wall plane, this is what I call the axis. Now, when we're in wheel plane, we can turn the axis, which then turns the direction of our planes. And we can turn that all the way to where we have one in front of the other. This is what I call wall plane in parallel. It can be done. It's a little hard. You're more off to one side or the other, but it's something that can be fun to play with just in general. I've already found that doing split time opposites with that exaggerated distance with one hand in front of the other actually makes a very clean opening on either side whenever you're coming out of the inversion. Then there's also what I call rotating the axis, which is basically tilting it and then bringing it up into horizontal versus horizontal, which is a horizontal versus horizontal parallel, in parallel, okay? And then whenever we go into wall plane versus wall plane, this is what I call in plane, because it's all one straight line with one toy spinning right beside the other. And from there we twist the axis, where we can actually lay out and then go into horizontal in plane, you know, coming from above, and we can also twist it back and end up coming from below, with the hand below the pivot point. So with that in mind, with all of that in mind, now these are coasters, but I'm going to use them as representations of our planes and their different orientations that we can do all around in either hand. Now, our three primary planes are obviously, you know, everybody that has started learning how to spin or has been spinning for a long time knows that we have our wheel plane, our wall plane, and our floor plane. And pretty much the wheel plane and wall plane are the bread and butter of toy spinning for just about everybody. But not a lot of emphasis is put on the floor plane, and I'm finding that out a lot in a lot of the videos that I've seen, and whether they're tutorials or exhibition or practice or, you know, whatever it is, there's, you know, really not a whole lot of emphasis on the horizontals. I mean, there is a lot of people out there that can do some really cool stuff with it, just not really emphasized, especially in inversions. But just in general, our first three planes are where we really kind of get into a comfort zone, but we also get to this point where we get bored and we're like, what else is there? And so just like Zion and a few others and Nick Woolsey and some others have mentioned, is that when we start going into our secondary planes, which the first set I call our angles, because they are between the the wheel plane and the wall plane at an angle. So this is what I call an inward angle and an outward angle. Inward angle on the left, outward angle on the left. Both in, both out. Angle to the right, angle to the left. Okay? This is turning to the right and to the left is basically that turning the axis principle that I was talking about just a while ago. And then we also have between the wheel plane and the floor plane the diagonals. In, out, both in, both out, diagonal to the left, diagonal to the right. Again, this is now a part of that rotating the axis principle that I was talking about earlier. Okay? So that they're staying in parallel. And pretty much what I mean by keeping them in parallel, even whenever you go into floor plane versus floor plane in parallel, is the idea that you can use the same principles of how you learned how to do your your inversions in parallel in the wheel plane can actually be applied to these different angles as long as they are in parallel. Even here, now going into the wall planes and stuff like that, that's where it kind of breaks down a little bit. It kind of becomes really weird in trying to figure out how to make it work properly. If anybody can figure that one out, please let me know. Anyways, then we go to our wall plane and our floor plane, and that's when we get our outward and our inward slopes. They're both in plane when both hands are out, both hands are in. They're both in plane with each other. So this is more relative to the wall plane. And whenever you rotate out, you can go all the way to the floor plane in either direction. You will see here in just a second why I mean that there is a difference in going different directions when I start showing you my spinning, which isn't pretty, by the way, but I can get by and try to learn new things as I'm going. But basically, the idea is whatever you learn in your wall plane inversions, you can apply that to your slopes and to in-plane floor plane. And also what you learn in your parallels is what you're going to apply to keeping in parallel as you turn the planes around. So this actually opens up a lot of the planes, a lot of it, a lot of the inversions that you can start working on. There's a lot of really tricky things that you'll have to pay attention to, but and I haven't really gotten all of it down myself. I still have to spend some time practicing my left and right angles and my left and right diagonals and stuff like that. Like my lovely poi, made them myself. 2 tennis balls, some twine, and a couple of fishing swivels. I'm kind of a little bit crafty about stuff. I try to make stuff as much as I can. It makes it cheaper. Anyways, first of all, like say, whenever we first start learning how to do our inversions, it's typical to start with things like the barrel rolls. Okay, and the big emphasis here is, getting that isolation feeling going back and forth. Okay. Then whenever you start going into, say, changing your angles, so that, like, say, now this is turned to the left on the angles, is being able to come back out and be on this side, be still in that angle. Now you'll note, because of the direction of it, it actually will feel a little more comfortable on the right, because it kind of has a feel of almost being like a floor plane, or I mean the wall plane, when you turn your body into it, but it's just turning your body away from it by about 45 degrees, and then coming back into it, and then being over here, which is going to feel a lot like doing your wheel plane right here, but just basically taking this and turning it 45 degrees from your body. Okay, so now if I turn into it right here at 45 degrees and I just turn my body out 45 degrees, this is where I get. So right here to right here. So basic principles work when doing in parallel. The ones that I have yet to really get a decent feel for is things like my diagonals. This right here, again, just same thing. Now we're doing this in diagonals, okay, and then rolling it back into that. And it's the same principles. So like I said, I really haven't practiced that a whole lot, but because of the basic principles of doing the in parallel inversion of the barrel roll, it's really not that hard to apply it to those other angles. Okay, then the next thing is, like I was saying, is going into the wall plane, split time opposite wall plane inversions, which I have found that I really enjoy because they are a bit of a challenge. especially whenever you start learning how to apply them to a wheel plane position. I will say this, probably go into depth in it a little bit later in another video, is you can take half of a inversion on the wall plane and apply it to one half of the wheel plane, and then take the opposite direction and apply it to the other side of the wheel plane going back. So how I would normally do this is going from left to right in the wheel planes. I can use this inward inversion on the left side, on one side or the other, and then once I get to the other side, it will feel like an outward inversion, and then I can sit there and I can use it to go back out, which I haven't really worked on that outward inversion a whole lot, so it's kind of a wonky for me right now, but I have figured that that can work. Same thing with taking one half of a wheel plane inversion and using it for one half of a wall plane inversion going in spin, or going the same direction. So if I was doing like this, where I'm same direction, you know, just throw that in and then throw that back in like that, okay? So that's the forward barrel roll, and the backward barrel roll being used to link in back and forth across the wall plane. So then where I was at of the twisting the planes. So now this for me is a outward spin. If I show it to you from the side, you'll probably see a little better. This is an outward slope with both hands. It's still a split time opposite. If you look at it from the front, it still looks like almost like a wall plane split time opposite. But from the side, it is at it's at a slope. And so we have to use just a slightly different technique, just slightly, to be able to make it flow through, which is being able to make this poi hand come up over instead of coming inside the arm, where normally here I found that if we take and we throw this inside so that it stays inside this your right hand with the right hand poi. The right hand poi goes around the left wrist. It's going to go inside the right hand, and then this hand is going to, as the left hand spinning around, is going to push, is actually going to take and push the wrist against the tether of the left hand poi. So it kind of does that number. All right. Taking that same principle, but now we're not just coming inside, we've actually got to give it a little bit of this upwards movement. We've got to kind of give it a little bit of this upwards movement to go over the arm, and then this one's going to come over the arm. Now, to really get a feel for that, I'd actually suggest going straight into horizontal versus horizontal. Coming from the top is what I call this, because my hands are above the poi. So coming from the top, normally, like if you've just got one hand spinning and you have that moment where you want to come up over the arm, up like that, that's what you're aiming for, is that up over motion. So whenever you come into it, you come up over. And with the following hand, which is now underneath, when it comes around, you got to make it come up over. You got to make it come up over, like so. So that's how that actually works, is being able to come up over on both hands. Again, not a lot of practice into this, but just basic principle is pretty much what I'm running on at the moment. And it's somewhat, it's one of those things that with enough time and practice, it can be a lot smoother. Now, here's where it gets weird, is the idea of whenever I start doing this split time, and I start coming back, all right? If I start coming back into this inward slope, this is feeling slightly weird because it's literally pointing back at my face, so I have to kind of, I'm going to have to practice this one. Definitely have to practice this one, because especially whenever I've tried doing this and I've gone into doing in-plane horizontal coming from the bottom, yeah, this definitely feels sketchy. Very, very sketchy. Because of the fact that the motion of moving around, now granted, here it would seem a little bit easier, you would think, because all you have to do is let the poi drop down underneath the arm, and then this one's going to just come out underneath on the other side. However, the problem is you're making this move right in front of your face. So like I said, sketchy as hell. So that so far is my first video in talking about these different inversions. Now, some of the planes I did not talk about. I remember now that I was talking about the 13 planes in any one hand, and I got to 9 out of those 13. But what I didn't talk to you about was the other 4. These other 4 I kind of come across just in concept at first. Was the idea of, if I take my wheel plane and I turn it 45 degrees into an inward angle. Now, if I was to twist this angle back at me, now it's at 45 degrees. This is now an inward angle, inward diagonal, inward slope. So it's an DSA, or diagonal sloped angle, as I like to call it. And it's inward on inward angle, inward diagonal, inward slope, so it's an IDSA. Now the opposite of that is still inward angle, but it's an outward slope, outward diagonal, so to me this is an IA ODS. Kind of catching what I'm going with right here. And then we've got 2 more, which this one's going out because it starts from the outward angle. This is on an outward slope, but it's on inward diagonal. So this is an ID OSA. And then the opposite of that is on the inward angle, but it's on an outward diagonal. And it's on inward slope. So it's an IS ODA. So I was able to kind of come up with all that myself in theory in my head, and came across the idea that, you know what, a lot of people aren't going to want to go, oh, did you learn how to do those IDSAs, or have you figured out how to work with your ID OSAs or your IS ODAs? Or, dude, I know myself, before that concept even gets out there, that people are going to be going, dude, no, we need something easier to work with. Okay, so here's what I decided. I decided to go with something a little more creative. And because there's 4 of them, I decided to think of, you know, times of day. So noon, midnight, sunrise, and sunset. What do you think? Noon planes, midnight planes, sunrise planes, sunset planes. Sounds interesting, sounds different, sounds artsy-fartsy, but, you know, if you don't like it, you can go back to IDSA, or you can come up with whatever you want. But the idea is, you know, these planes do exist, and they are 45 degrees off of everything else, and they complete the whole pattern of having 45 degree segments all around a 360 degree sphere in 360 by 360 by 360. Okay, so now with